Tower 42 Echo X-ray, can we go ahead and start turning to the southwest towards the 11?
This sounded like a routine call, but to aviation experts, that's where everything began to spiral. From the pilot's first call to know if the airway is clear for them to continue their journey, to the pilot announcing the crash, these are the last words of Ara Zobayan, the pilot during Kobe Bryant's crash. Okay, we'll continue holding. On January 26, 2020, early in the morning, the fog is thick, visibility is trash, and pilot Ara Zobayan is stuck in a holding pattern outside Burbank airspace. This wasn't just a 5-minute wait. This delay lasted a whole 12 minutes, starting around 9:20 a.m. PST.
It's going to be a little bit. I got a citation on a 9-mile final, and then the go around that I just had is going to be turning base to final in about 3 minutes.
No cap. That exchange seems totally normal, right? But that simple phrase, okay, we'll continue holding, is actually low-key one of the most important communications of the entire flight. This was at 9 hours, 24 minutes, and 35 seconds AM PST, and it shows us exactly what was going down at that moment. The helicopter was already flying under Special Visual Flight Rules, SVFR, which is basically aviation talk for visibility, ain't it? But I can still see enough to fly. The weather was so bad that the LAPD had straight up grounded all their helicopters. That's your first major red flag right there. So why does this matter? It's giving major planned continuation bias vibes, which is basically the aviation version of sunk cost fallacy. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, literally called this out as a factor in the crash. It's like when you've been waiting in line for a Supreme drop for hours and then decide to buy something you don't even want just because you've already invested the time. Think about the psychology here. You've been holding for 12 minutes in sketchy weather, flying Kobe Bryant to his daughter's basketball tournament. The clock is ticking. That wait time is living rent-free in your head. When you finally get clearance, are you more or less likely to push forward even if conditions get worse? No shade to the pilot, but aviation psychology absolutely suggests this creates self-imposed pressure. During this holding period, Zobayan was keeping it professional, circling between 900 and 1,100 feet above mean sea level, with speeds between 40 and 70 knots, according to the NTSB final report. Man was doing his job by the book. But here's the tea. Helicopter pilots have this whole campaign called Land and Live, which basically says if vibes get sketchy, just land and wait it out. It's literally that simple sometimes. Had the pilot decided to touch down after this delay and reassess, we might be looking at a completely different timeline. So that's the first communication. Okay, we'll continue holding. 4 basic words that hit different when you understand what came next. Not trying to turn this into a villain origin story, but this delay was giving butterfly effect energy to everything that followed. Van Nuys, Helicopter 2, X with you for the special VFR transition. We are currently at 1400. So after the whole Burbank holding situation, the pilot finally got cleared to follow Interstate 5 northbound. Now it's around 9:35 a.m. PST, and the helicopter is rolling up on Van Nuys airspace. Time for the pilot to check in with the new control tower.
There 2 Echo X-ray with you for the special VFR transition. We are currently at 1400.
Zobayan hits them with, Van Nuys, Helicopter 2EX with you for the special VFR transition. We are currently at 1400. Now I know that sounds like boring aviation talk, but let me break down why this is actually cracked. The controller came back with the weather report, and it was not giving good vibes. Wind calm, visibility 2.5, ceiling 1100 overcast, Van Nuys altimeters 30.16. Translation for all you non-pilots in the chat. Visibility was barely 2.5 miles, and the clouds were just 1,100 feet above ground level. Let's do some quick math here. Van Nuys Airport is at about 800 feet elevation, which means the clouds were starting at around 1,900 feet MSL. That's above sea level. The pilot just said they were at 1,400 feet MSL. So big brain time, they were still below the clouds at this point. That's actually super important to understand. When you're flying under Visual Flight Rules, VFR, it's literally in the name, you need to see stuff. You need visual references like the ground, the horizon, landmarks. Flying into clouds when you're not set up for instrument flying is basically like playing Fortnite with your monitor turned off. It's actual suicide. The controller cleared them through the airspace and told them to follow the 118 freeway westbound. This was still all standard procedure. The pilot was doing everything by the book, and the communication was giving very professional energy. What makes this transmission so important is that it represents the last normal phase of the flight. This is like that part in a horror movie where everything seems fine, but the ominous music is starting to play in the background. The helicopter was operating within limits, following procedures, maintaining visual references, but heading toward terrain and weather that was about to go from mid to absolutely cursed. At this point, the pilot still had options in his back pocket. He could have diverted to a nearby airport if things got worse. worse. He could have landed in a parking lot to wait out the fog. The NTSB report later noted the pilot could have reversed course or landed at any time prior to entering the clouds. The phrase, "We are currently at 1,400 inches," is like the last normal tweet before someone's account goes off the rails. It's a snapshot from the timeline where things were still following the script. 10 minutes later, everything would change dramatically, and this routine altitude report would become part of the last breadcrumb trail leading to tragedy. VFR conditions, 1,500 feet, 2 echoes. As the helicopter continued pushing west, the pilot made another check-in that needed attention. Around 9:39 a.m., Zobayan reported, VFR conditions, 1,500 feet, 2 Echo X-ray.
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray approved, and are you transitioning in VFR condition?
VFR condition 1,500, 2 Echoes.
Let's decode this for the normies watching. This short message is actually spitting facts about 3 different things. First, VFR conditions means the pilot was confirming he could see everything needed to navigate visually. It's like telling your Uber driver, "Yeah bro, I can see you," when they ask if you're at the pickup spot. Second, 1,500 feet shows the helicopter had climbed 100 feet higher than the previous report. Not a huge change, but worth noting they were gaining a bit of altitude while staying below the cloud ceiling. Third, 2 Echo X-ray is just the helicopter's call sign, N72EX, shortened for radio talk. The Van Nuys controller responded by saying, "Helicopters 2X, thank you. Contact SoCal now, 134.2 for flight following." Translation, 8, you're good to go. Now switch to this other frequency to talk to Southern California Approach Control. This handoff to SoCal Approach for flight following is like getting a personal escort through busy airspace. It's optional, but definitely smart, especially in busing conditions like they were experiencing. What makes this communication so important is that it's literally the last time anyone confirmed the helicopter was in VFR conditions before the crash. Let that sink in. This is the last moment we know for sure the pilot could still see the ground and navigate visually. Within minutes after this transmission, as the helicopter approached the hills around Calabasas, those VFR conditions would disappear faster than PS5S on launch day. The NTSB determined that shortly after this point, the helicopter entered fog and clouds, transitioning from VFR to IMC, Instrument Meteorological Conditions, a situation the flight wasn't cleared or prepared for. This is giving last known photo energy. When the pilot reported VFR conditions, he was still operating within safe parameters, but the margin for error was shrinking with every mile westward toward the hills of Calabasas, where fog was collecting in the valleys and hillsides. The contrast between this routine report of VFR conditions and what happened just minutes later is absolutely mind-blowing. It's like watching someone tweet, "Having a great day, nothing bad could possibly happen," right before disaster strikes. The helicopter went from standard operations to a life or death situation in what felt like an instant. Can we turn southwest for 101? Let's keep it moving. After transitioning through Van Nuys airspace, the pilot needed to adjust the route. Now, the exact words aren't in the official transcripts, but based on what happened next, Zobayan likely asked something like, "Can we turn southwest for 101?
Tower report 2 Echo X-ray, can we go ahead and start turning to the southwest close to 101?
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray approved, and are you transitioning in VFR condition?
VFR condition 1,500, 2 Echo.
This might sound basic, but it's actually crucial to understand what was happening. Highway 101 is a major freeway running northwest from Los Angeles through the valley and toward Camarillo. For helicopter pilots, following highways is navigation 101, no pun intended, when flying under visual flight rules. It's like following the yellow brick road. You always know where you are as long as you can see it below you. Flight tracking data shows that around 9:40 a.m., the helicopter did indeed turn southwest to link up with Highway 101, heading toward their destination. This came after they'd been following the 118 freeway westbound as instructed by Van Nuys Tower. Look, this routing decision was a W from a navigation standpoint. Highway 101 was the express lane to Camarillo Airport, their destination. By following this major highway, the pilot was balancing the speed run to their destination while maintaining visual navigation in sketchy weather conditions. The controller must have approved this request because radar data confirms the helicopter made that exact turn to intercept and follow the 101. This put them on a path through the Santa Monica Mountains near Calabasas, terrain that's way more complex than the flat San Fernando Valley they were leaving behind. Here's where it gets sus: the loss. Angela's Times analysis shows that as the helicopter followed the 101 into the hills near Calabasas, it flew straight into increasingly dense fog and low clouds. It's like they were heading into the storm circle in a battle royale, but without the proper equipment. The seemingly normal routing request, "Can we turn southwest for 101?" low-key set up the entire endgame. The pilot was trying to make a pro-gamer move by following a visual landmark, but that path led them straight into the worst possible conditions. What's wild is that this was a completely standard decision based on the information the pilot had at that moment. But sometimes in aviation, just like in life, you make a perfectly reasonable choice that puts you on collision course with disaster without even knowing it. The request to follow Highway 101 Southwest represents that critical fork in the road. In an alternate timeline, maybe they take a different route or land to wait out the fog. But in our timeline, this navigation decision, made while conditions were still manageable, led them toward the hills of Calabasas, where visibility was about to drop to zero. 34.2, Nechox. After reporting VFR conditions at 1,500 feet, the pilot received instructions from Van Nuys Tower to contact Southern California Terminal Radar Approach Control, SoCal TRACON, on frequency 134.2 megahertz for flight following services.
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray, thank you. Contact SoCal now 134.2 for flight following 34.2.
34.2.
Zobayan's response was short and sweet, 34.2, NECO-X. This might sound like random numbers and letters to normies, but in aviation, this is standard shorthand with specific meanings. 34.2 inches is pilot speak for the frequency 134.2 megahertz. They often drop the 1 inch because everyone knows what's up. It's like saying, "I'll meet you at Starbucks" instead of "I'll meet you at the Starbucks coffee shop." NECO-X is the abbreviated version of the helicopter's call sign, N72EX. In aviation phonetics, the full call sign would be November 72 Echo X-ray, but that's way too long for quick radio exchanges. It's like how no one says Instagram anymore, it's just IG. What makes this small exchange important is that it represents a handoff between control facilities, specifically from Van Nuys Tower to SoCal TRACON. These transitions are crucial moments, like passing the baton in a relay race. If you drop it, bad things happen. Flight following is basically having ATC keep an eye on you, giving warnings about traffic or hazards. Requesting this service shows Zobayan was being extra cautious given the sketchy weather. It's like enabling two-factor authentication, an extra layer of safety. At this point, the helicopter was westbound, having just left Van Nuys airspace and beginning to follow Highway 101 toward Calabasas. The weather, while sus, still allowed for VFR operations. What's low-key heartbreaking about this routine 34.2, NECO-X exchange is that it happened during one of the last normal phases of the flight. The helicopter was still operating within standard parameters, with the pilot maintaining professional communications and following all the rules. When viewed in the context of what came next, this brief acknowledgement, like checking in on a new radio frequency, shows how quickly situations can change in aviation. 1 minute, you're following standard procedures, and the next minute, everything goes sideways. Zobayan had over 8,200 flight hours, including major experience with this type of helicopter. He wasn't some random pilot, he was experienced and qualified, but sometimes even the GOATs can get caught in impossible situations. This simple frequency change acknowledgement shows the systematic approach to aviation safety, clear communication, established procedures, continuous coordination, but it also foreshadows how even the most thorough systems and experienced professionals can be overwhelmed when conditions deteriorate with no warning. I'm West of Van Nuys and I'm gonna climb above the layer. Now we're getting to the end game. As the helicopter continued westbound following Highway 101 into increasingly challenging terrain, the pilot made a critical communication at approximately 9:44 a.m. PST. I'm West of Van Nuys, and I'm gonna climb above the layer. This statement is the biggest plot twist in the entire flight. For the first time, Zobayan was explicitly acknowledging that there was a cloud layer blocking visibility and announcing his plan to climb above it. The layer he mentioned was the cloud ceiling, which had been reported as 1,100 feet above ground level at Van Nuys earlier. This decision to climb was a complete 180 from the previous strategy. Until this point, they'd been cruising between 1,400 and 1,500 feet, following highways, staying below the clouds to maintain visual references, essential for visual flight rules. Now, the pilot was switching up the game plan completely, deciding to climb above the clouds instead. The geographical reference, West of Van Nuys, puts the helicopter near the Santa Monica Mountains around Calabasas, where the terrain terrain gets way more complex than the flat San Fernando Valley. This area had fog and low clouds collecting in valleys and hillsides, creating visibility black holes where conditions could change faster than TikTok trends. This communication is the pilot's realization that things were getting sketchy, and his attempt to problem solve in real time. He was trying to level up the flight by climbing to an altitude where visibility might be better above the cloud layer. But here's where it gets complicated. This decision, while trying to improve the situation, was high risk. Climbing through clouds means switching from visual flight rules to instrument flight rules, IFR, a completely different game that requires specific training, clearance, and equipment. The NTSB would later determine this maneuver, put the helicopter straight into instrument meteorological conditions, IMC, that it wasn't cleared for. About a minute later, at 9 hours 45 minutes and 15 seconds AM, Zobayan made his final transmission to SoCal approach. We climbing to 4,002 Echo X-ray. This confirmed he was committed to the climb and aiming for 4,000 feet. The controller asked, "And then what are you going to do when you get to altitude?" but received no response. The line went dead. Game over. Radar data showed the helicopter only made it to about 2,300 feet before entering a left turn and then descending at an actual crazy rate, over 4,000 feet per minute. It never reached the target altitude of 4,000 feet. The last radar contact was at 1,200 feet, just seconds before impact. The statement, "I'm West of Van Nuys and I'm going to climb above the layer," marks the exact moment this flight went from standard to emergency. It shows the pilot recognized the danger and was actively trying to fix it. But once they entered the clouds, spatial disorientation kicked in, a condition where pilots lose all sense of which way is up, down, left, or right. The NTSB concluded that this spatial disorientation, resulting from continued VFR flight into instrument conditions, was what caused the crash. This final decision to climb above the clouds while trying to salvage the situation ultimately led to the tragedy. We're climbing to 4,002 Echo X. We've arrived at the final and most crucial communication of this tragic flight. At 9 hours 45 minutes and 19 seconds AM PST, the pilot made his last transmission ever. We climbing to 4,002 Echo X. These 9 words were the last anyone would hear from the helicopter before it crashed. The statement came after the controller asked at 17 hours 45 minutes and 17 seconds UTC, and 2 Echo X were say intentions. Zobayan's reply confirmed he was actively trying to climb to 4,000 feet, way higher than their previous cruising altitude around 1,500 feet. This final transmission is more important than most people realize. First, it confirms the pilot was actually executing the climb he'd announced earlier. He wasn't just talking about it, he was doing it, trying to get above those clouds. The specific altitude, 4,000 feet, shows how high Zobayan thought they needed to go to clear the cloud tops. This suggests he estimated the clouds ended somewhere below this altitude. The NTSB later found that cloud tops in the area were analyzed at about 2,400 feet MSL, so his estimate wasn't far off. Notice the slight hesitation at the beginning, which might seem like nothing, but in aviation, communications could indicate increased focus or workload. Imagine trying to concentrate on flying a helicopter in zero visibility while also talking on the radio. It's like trying to text while playing a high-stakes game of Warzone. After this final transmission, the controller asked at 17 hours 45 minutes and 24 seconds UTC, "And then what are you going to do when you get to altitude?" This question went unanswered. The helicopter had already begun its fatal descent. Radar data shows the helicopter climbed to about 2,300 feet, not even close to the 4,000 foot target, before entering a left turn and then dropping like a rock at over 4,000 feet per minute with a ground speed of 160 knots. The last signal received was at 1,200 feet, just moments before impact. This final communication happened during what pilots fear most, inadvertent VFR into IMC. Imagine driving down a highway at 120 miles per hour and suddenly a thick fog engulfs your car and someone blindfolds you. That's basically what happened. The transition from visual to instrument flying requires a complete mental switch, from using outside references to trusting only your instruments. The NTSB determined that the pilot's decision to continue flight under visual flight rules into instrument meteorological conditions, which resulted in the pilot's spatial disorientation and loss of control, caused the crash. Spatial disorientation is no joke. It's where your brain literally can't tell which way is up anymore. What makes this final transmission so heartbreaking is that it shows the pilot actively working to solve the problem. He wasn't panicking or frozen. He was implementing a plan that, in his professional judgment, would get them through safely. He was communicating clearly and following procedures right until the very end. But within seconds of saying these words, the situation deteriorated beyond what any human pilot could handle. When the news broke about Kobe's crash, the internet straight up broke. The world lost not just a basketball GOAT, but his 13-year-old daughter Gianna and 7 others. John, Carrie, and Alyssa Altabelli, Christina Mauser, Sarah and Peyton Chester, and pilot Arzo Bryant. That day changed basketball forever. The aftermath of Kobe's death was like nothing we'd ever seen before. NBA players were crying on the court, games got postponed, and fans created memorial shrines outside Staples Center that you could see from space. Kobe's memorial service at Staples was beyond emotional. Michael Jordan crying while calling Kobe his little brother is an image none of us will ever forget. Vanessa Bryant went through it in the most public way possible. She not only lost her husband and daughter, but had to deal with leaked crash site photos taken by first responders who shared them like they were casual Instagram stories. She later won a $28.5 million settlement against Los Angeles County over this violation. The crash triggered major changes in aviation safety. The Kobe Bryant and Gianna Bryant Helicopter Safety Act was introduced in Congress, requiring terrain awareness systems in all helicopters carrying 6 or more passengers. The FAA also started pushing harder for helicopter companies to create better risk assessment programs and enhance training for making decisions in bad weather. Kobe's legacy lives on through his family, the Mamba and Mambacita Sports Foundation, and his impact on the game. His Mamba mentality became more than a catchphrase. It's a whole philosophy about outworking everyone and pushing through adversity. Every fadeaway jumper, every player who yells Kobe when tossing something in the trash, every number 24 or 8 jersey hanging in arenas, they're all reminders of his impact. Those final words from the pilot, we climbing to 4002 Echo X-ray, represent not just the end of a flight, but the last moment before the world lost a legend who was just getting started on his second act. Kobe was focused on coaching Gianna, making Oscar-winning short films, writing children's books, and building businesses. We lost not just who Kobe was, but everything he was about to become. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.